Okay, Mr. Cermello, it looks like we're good.
Okay, so I will ask us again to please stand so we can pledge the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Mr. Champagne, do we have public comment?
We do. Just bear with me 1 second. Let
Okay,
me get the list here. Okay, first up we have is Mrs. Brett. Before we do, I just wanted to apologize. The agenda got out onto Facebook late today. I noticed it late in the afternoon. So some of the comments did come in after 6 o'clock. I was able to get those done. I would just say that hopefully, under normal circumstances, I know our board clerk was out today and I believe on Friday. So hopefully that won't happen in the future. But let's see here. So, yep, Mrs. Brett is up first. And I believe she's here.
Yep. Hi, everybody. Good evening. Allison Brett, 11 Stanley Drive, Seymour. As a parent and educator, I am currently taken back by the discussions that have taken place at our last couple of board meetings. As a community, we have never had to handle a pandemic, and there will always be pros and cons to every decision that is made. However, we need to work collaboratively, and that is something that has not been happening. Parents, educators, and administration should all be a part of the reopening plan. The division that has taken place is heartbreaking, and I hope that we all can place our personal feelings aside and begin to put the students of Seymour first. With that being said, it was very upsetting to hear at the curriculum meeting and past meetings that we continually focus on the students who are struggling and have never yet mentioned those who have persevered, took responsibility for their learning, and has excelled during this time. Where is the data on the percentage of students who would have met eligibility for honor roll? Why is that not being shared? We need to celebrate the successes as well as look to assist those who are struggling. However, lowering the level of expectation for students is not going to solve the rate of failing. Engagement will. There was many discussions about engagement, whether it's through sports, clubs, as well as, and there's a big component that we're missing, parent engagement. What are the steps that need to be taken? What is our parent engagement plan? Do we have one? Do we have a community engagement plan? These are the questions that need further investigation. Yes, clubs is an answer, but it's only a piece to the puzzle of the bigger answer that we need to solve. How are we getting our parents engaged? We need to continue to keep the level of expectation high because it is our responsibility to keep pushing our children and students to prepare them for the future and for real world. Thank you.
okay. Next, Mr. Champagne. Thank you, Mrs. Brett.
The next person I have up, I don't see on here on the video or the meeting. So next up is Ms. Perry. And
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yep.
Okay, sorry, my video is not working. Thank you for letting me speak tonight. As a parent of 2 students, one in Bungay, one in the middle school, I'm just hoping that the decision not to bring back students in the middle school and the high school can be reevaluated. I am grateful that my son, who goes to Bungay, is now full-time, but I just wish that maybe the other schools can be reconsidered also. I think it's great that the vaccines are coming out sooner, but I hope the April return date is not based on that. We all know what happens with vaccine rollouts. I actually give them, sometimes there are glitches, and I just think that we need to put our students first as other districts have. So please, can you reconsider the return date for the middle school and the high school? Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Perry. Okay, Mr. Champagne.
All right, next up was Vicky Babineau. I don't see her on here. I'll loop back around at the end. Right now, we have up next Megan Krasinski.
Good evening, everybody. Megan Krasinski, everyone can hear me? Megan Krasinski, 211 Mountain Road. Yes. Okay, good evening, Board of Education members. I am commenting once again to express how disappointing it is that the Seymour Education Association leadership was once again left out of the return to full in-person learning discussions with administration. The best way to maintain strong labor management relationships is by continuous dialogue. Yet over the last couple months, there has been little to no conversation about the return to full in-person learning. Teachers have reached out to the SEA leadership with ideas, concerns, and questions in hopes that timely and meaningful discussions with central office administration would have taken place. It is important to realize that the SEA is made up of approximately 190 teachers who educate the children of Seymour. Please keep in mind that this means there are approximately 190 different feelings and opinions about the return to full in-person learning. It would be impossible to have a discussion with that many teachers, so the need for representatives to bring those views to the discussion table is imperative. But when there is no seat at the table, those feelings and opinions are not accounted for. The SEA leadership needs to be part of these important discussions going forward. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Mr. Champagne.
Yep, and the last person I have is Carrie Wilson, and I do see her on here. Yep,
Hi, can you hear me?
we can hear you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carrie Wilson, 62 Briarwood Drive. So with the numbers in Connecticut going down, why can't we consider opening Seymour Middle School and the high school sooner than April 12th? The governor is allowing more people at gatherings and arenas. My son can play contact sports, but he can't go to school 5 days a week. A few suggestions. I mean, I would think you've already thought of these, but why not have the students stay in one classroom and have the teachers move from classroom to classroom? Get plexiglass to put in front of the teachers like they do at grocery stores and restaurants. Review the protocols of other districts that have been in school full-time the entire year. Kids are not getting this education that they deserve. Our children have lost almost an entire year of in-school learning. They are way behind. Dr. Fauci and the CDC recommends it's time to go back to school. Why can't we figure this out? It feels like you're refusing to address this situation of returning as soon as possible. It's time to get them back in school. The United States death rate, ages 5 through 14 years, is 72 children. 15 to 24 years is 648 people in the United States. Less than 15% of ages 25 to 65 have lost their lives to COVID. Thanks.
Thank you.
And that is all I have, Mr. Schmel.
Okay, so we will move right along to the first item agenda, and it is the discussion of the reopening of schools. I will turn it over to Mr. Wilson to begin.
Good evening, everyone. My comments will be brief tonight, and I will turn it over to all the members of the team. As was asked by the board back in December to create a reopening plan, and the plan was presented to the board. It then got revamped a bit and resent out to both the board and to the entire community while listening to the recommendations from our district doctor, our director of our Naugatuck Valley Health District, our town emergency management director, as well as all the members on this call of the administration team, going with a slow approach to a return and looking forward towards a fuller return. Everyone has heard about the vaccine rollout, which on March 1st, teachers will be eligible for. We have been planning and working very closely with our Naugatuck Valley Health District in getting that rollout. Once the department gets the correct number of doses, we will then schedule for all of our teachers and staff in Seymour. So more to come on that as soon as the numbers get released, which hopefully will be by tomorrow, so that we have a plan for Monday. So constant communication there. So looking also forward to that. So we have a plan in place that we are excited that started on Monday, welcoming our K2 learners back. And as I said, everyone on the call will have an opportunity to speak this evening. So Mrs. Tenza.
Sure. We did in December create phases. We were charged, the superintendent was charged with creating additional phases to bring in more students, and the board had asked us to consider high needs and our youngest and struggling learners first. And so that was based on data, and we did do that. And most recently we were asked to again try to bring in the youngest learners. So what we did was we met as a team and charged our administrators to go back into their buildings and talk with their staff. And again, Mike, like Ms. Krasinski pointed out, you can't talk to everyone, but our administrators did talk to several of their teachers about different ideas. And that is where our, as Mr. Wilson had called it, the bifurcated approach came from. That is something that was supported by our administrators and our teachers in terms of the K2 and then the 3-5 rollout. So, I guess I would like to say that the plan that we have is thoughtful and created on safety. And I think if you hear what our administrators, are eager to talk about, you'll hear that our approach, this week has created some great results, and we're excited to continue to move forward and get our students back in a safe return. And we are, definitely interested in the vaccine so that it will keep our teachers safe. So I think we can probably start with maybe Chatfield DePresti.
Good evening, everyone. Dave Alekna, Principal at Chatfield DePresti. Obviously, we're very happy to have our grades K-2 students back, and with the grade 3, 4, and 5 students on the near horizon. Certainly, as Mrs. Tenza and Mr. Wilson have said, it's been already for us a very positive week, but also presented some challenges as well. But without a doubt, we feel that the approach that we are following in Seymour is the right one. That we're, just for coming back full distance students, that we had 4 full distance students that came back for the February 22nd date, and 2 that had been homeschooling also returned. So, it did draw some more that had been opting for full distance for the entire year to come in person now. And so we did have 1 student that his family chose to go remote at this time. And we've already received indications that an additional 5 students are going to be coming back from the full distance or remote come March 8th. So that's 11 coming, indicating coming back, and 1 going the other way. So 10 more in person in that. So that shows parents are also responding well to the approach. Today, one of the, when people ask, why can't we bring everybody back all at once? Today would, some things I'd like to share is a cohort B or cohort 2 day. And for CLS, that's a larger number of students than on cohort 1 or cohort A. And so, that meant that where we worked out our parking and pickup procedures throughout the course of the time up to now, we had some backing up onto Skokerat more significantly than we had at any other day throughout our return. And so if we were to, by coming back with phase 2, K2 in their siblings full time, that was just shy of 150 more students into CLS. March 8th will be just slightly more than 120 more. So if you factor in all, who's a bus versus a drop-off pickup, I know that doesn't sound like we're talking about importance of the academics, but we got to make the building run. We have to make in all those procedures and things we have to keep in mind for keeping everyone safe as well. That we have lunch and breakfast in the classrooms. We also have been operating, I'm just speaking for CLS, we have 6 paraprofessional positions that are not filled. And we rely, everybody is extremely important in the school organization across the entire district, everyone. And so that goes for the cafeteria workers, the paraprofessionals, in addition to the instructional assistants, they're also assisting getting the meals to the children. We're down 6. We also are in the winter. We also, as you are aware, had a couple classrooms go on quarantine this week. That impacted the classroom teachers. It also impacted paraprofessional and unified arts staff. And we don't have replacements for those paraprofessionals that went out, and we still have to deliver the meals. We still have to provide the instructional support. So these are not complaints by any means. It's just pointing out logistics of running and working the building are very challenging, that it's a lot easier to do it and safer to do it in phases. Case in point, if we were to have all those students come back, well, we realized with some things with the busing that, and obviously bus procedures are paramount in keeping everyone safe, and we have to follow loading from the back, masks being worn, siblings sitting together. These are some things that came to light this week that we needed to communicate as a administrative team with All-Star on the importance of following those things. And if we had full buses with everybody back, we were only 2 days in when we had to do the quarantining, that it was extremely important that we with some of the things, I'm not going to obviously get into very specific here details, but if some things were followed differently, we could have had even fewer. I have to say kudos to Nurse Reynolds and Nurse Bennett, for Nurse Reynolds as CLS nurse and Nurse Bennett, the district nurse, for helping. And the time of going through the video footage, I now can empathize with my administrative colleagues who've already done that, for helping determine for quarantining. And again, instructions somewhere in the mix there for the administrative team that also has to, that's part of our roles too. But we're looking at video footage. We're making sure we have safety procedures in place. We have a tremendous amount of pulling together as a staff, and people going above and beyond, pitching in, looking to help out. People that have had, because of the different scenarios that I've already presented, chip in to cover a lunch wave in a classroom here or there. We have paraprofessionals that are substituting in classrooms while teachers have been on mandatory quarantining. And so therefore those paraprofessionals can't do, I said we're 6 in the hole for the paras. Then you take in people that are on quarantine. Then we have to factor in those that are subbing because of teachers that are on quarantining. Whew, long day for me. And so as a result, it's a full load. It's a lot. Staff have shared, that we have followed the best way possible. And credit to Seymour, educators, paraprofessionals, everyone. We bend, we don't break. But we could tell it with our staff that it's just not as simple as snapping your fingers to have everybody back as quickly. That's really what I would like to say about that. And that, and also, way at the bottom of the list of everybody else I'm putting ahead of us, but Ms. Albertson and myself are regularly subbing on top of everything else too. The photographs that we submitted, if you've had a chance to look through those or not, but you do have photographs from multiple classrooms throughout CLS, K through 5, every grade level, and shows a good indication of the spacing. Tried a few different angles there, and you may see some desks that are adjacent to one another, and those would be upper grade where we don't have everybody back yet. So for no panic, everybody going, what's going on there? So I know that, I've fielded, and I understand the parental concerns of why, if K2's back, why can't I have my third grader back? Or how come a third grader gets to come back because, or fourth grader because they have a sibling, but my child doesn't have a sibling and can't come back and has to wait till March 8th. In essence, it's 5 days. It's because of the 3-2-2-3 rotation, and that that it has allowed us to safely open and plan and strategize for the next wave. You know, I've been in the district now a long time. I'm really organized, and I know my colleagues are too. And we want everybody back as fast as possible, but it has to be safe and it has to be organized. And every meeting, we're always talking about it. And there really is no one at the top of the priority list. It's just everybody's at the top of the priority list as far as I'm concerned, because and there are some, and I really appreciate the parental support that we've received too. I do think that needs to be stated, but and I'll just, some nice positive last remarks I'll just say is, the teachers also this week in grades K1, 2, with the teachers looking out at their classrooms have been comments to Ms. Albertson and myself at different pop-ins and things like that. Wow, it's like they realize it's been like a year, and that it's great having the kids back. And but I would just, for my people on the board that know me for a long time, I'm very, very honest, and I absolutely think I'm going to throw my sense in as well, that the secondary had to wait till after the elementary. They couldn't come at the same time for just the logistical stuff that we're dealing with right now this week. And so I feel we've been doing the best approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alekna. I do want to recognize Dr. Curtis and Head Nurse Bennett, who are also on the call. Dr. Curtis, thank you for your partnership and for taking the time. And I know you've reviewed all of our plans, and you've actually written letters that the board has seen and all the administrators have seen as well. So thank you for taking the time. I know your time is, if you can hang on to hear from the admins, and then we would open it up to questions, if that's okay with your schedule this evening, because the admins would present, and then if the board has any questions of you or any of the administrators or Nurse Bennett, we thought that would be a good lineup. But I didn't want to not welcome you to the meeting and thank you for all that you've done so far and for all of your support and for your guidance. It has been tremendous. So I just wanted to recognize you publicly so that people knew who you were on the call, and I apologize for not doing that sooner. That is 100% my mistake. I apologize.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mrs. Feige.
Hi, Mary Sue Feige, principal of Bungay School. Thank you for this opportunity. Our goals are the same as the districts, that we want to maintain the safety of the staff and the students. And we want to increase the teacher and student in-person contact. I thank Becky Bennett every single day for her guidance and support. We have an amazing team here at Bungay School. We continue to wear masks, a social distance, the best that we can, and the hand washing are all musts in our building at all times. We did have the hybrid model, and we were able to maintain the 6-foot distance. We have gone in grades 1, 3, and 5. We're unable to keep that 6-foot distance any longer. We have about 20 students or so in a classroom, and you can see by those pictures of the distance there. The other people I'd like to really commend are our custodians, and in between classes and lunches, they are in those classrooms, and they're sanitizing throughout the entire day. They're in the bathrooms all the time. They are running throughout the building, doing what they need to do to keep it safe and to keep it clean. I'm truly impressed with our staff there. And our masks are worn throughout the day. We have mask breaks. Masks are removed when students are eating breakfast, when they're having their snacks, and during lunch times. And that is done in the classroom. there. We want to keep our cohorts together as a district admin team. We talked about this and discussed it, and both elementary schools have agreed to have like lunches in the classroom and all. It has been successful having all the siblings back in the building too with the K-2 students. And I know that the parents have been very grateful for that. We've had a lot of parent contact. We're keeping our parents informed of everything there. And I think Mr. Olekna said a lot. So I think that's pretty much, unless you have some questions for Bungay School, but I just thank everyone for their support.
Thank you, Mrs. Feige. Mrs. Roden.
Mr. Wilson, if I can interrupt a minute, please.
Sure.
Okay, knowing that there is definite a difference between the levels, I'm going to suggest that we ask questions of the elementary principals at this time prior to allowing our middle school people to speak. So the chair will recognize someone who would like to ask a question, and I will start alphabetically with Mrs. Bruno.
Just looking at the pictures, those are really helpful, and thank you so much. I'm just wondering, through the chair, Bungie listed the class sizes, and I know I had asked about that in an email prior to the meeting. I'm wondering if we could get the class sizes for Chatfield.
I can get them for you. Been working nonstop and got you what we could. Unfortunately, that was best I could do today. Ms. Albertson, I
Okay.
could do.
Thank you. It's very
Sure.
helpful.
Okay, Mr. Champagne.
I'm just wondering, the main question that I have is, how are we handling sub coverage with these teachers that have to go out in quarantine?
As I shared a little bit in my remarks, if a teacher is quarantining and is not ill, him or herself, then we need to have an adult in the classroom for the students who are in person. And I'm figuring, Mr. Champagne, that your question is referencing teachers out but the class is in, correct?
Yeah, more or less.
So if we had a substitute teacher that wanted to work to come in, we would then have them there. CLS has been pretty much all year, I'm just speaking for CLS, without a building substitute. I know the other buildings have had them at times, but they also have had other needs of how those have transitioned to long-term substitutes and things like that too. So as a result, that's kind of what I was sharing about all hands on deck, where in some cases so if I'm just going to answer for CLS, that if there is a distance learning teacher that is teaching the same grade as a teacher who is on quarantine, then in some cases we have that teacher teach in that classroom. So if a fourth grade teacher is on quarantine, the fourth grade distance learning teacher still is able to teach her full distance class, but doing it inside of the other classroom, the quarantining teacher's classroom. So there's adult supervision. Also, because there is independent work time still with the distance learning class as well, that the teacher is still 100% familiar with the curriculum, because it's the same exact curriculum that he or she is teaching. And so that's in some cases it's hard to say what's best, but that is most common that we're doing. But we do not have, if for instance, we do not have a kindergarten full distance teacher that is housed at Chatfield Lepresti School. So if a kindergarten teacher was quarantining, we would not put in any other grade. Oh, just because they're a distance learning teacher. No, that we're doing it because of the consistency of the curriculum. We, in those cases, then there's any number of ways that we do it. It begins again by seeing what are some options. If there is a paraprofessional that is almost exclusively in that classroom for the entire day already, which also has happened. So we haven't always had to go the distance learning teacher route with a class that actually is the same as a distance learning teacher. Then the paraprofessional can be there because the teacher is still with that class all day from her home as well. But we still have to provide lunch for the paraprofessional because often that, again, for cohorting and for safety, that paraprofessionals tend to most likely going to be the paraprofessional that is watching that class for lunch and recess on an ordinary basis already. So at some point we have to give them their 30-minute lunch. So it brings in somebody else. That's where we could have really, it could be a language arts consultant. It could be an SRBI teacher. It could be a school psychologist, school counselor. It could be a special education teacher that also services students in the room. It could be an assistant principal, or it could be a principal. And it has been all of those numerous times. And I have to say, people are happy to pitch in. It's just when that's happening, there is a trickle down effect, of course, because that psychologist, that school counselor, that language arts consultant, the SRBI teacher also has students. So we can't keep going to the same well either. So we're thinking as much outside the box as we possibly can. And then there's also some as assigned by principal time for unified arts teachers that sometimes they assist with some of the with classes that they're familiar with as well that are on their cohort that they're teaching that particular week. And we do once in a while have a substitute come in. But I have to tell you that I do not believe we've had a substitute teacher take a position in ASAP that's been posted in at least 2 weeks at CLS. And I got a head nod from Ms. Albertson. I am accurate with that. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Champagne, I would just give you an example for today. We did have 2 substitutes in our building who had taken positions through ASOPs. We use them. We also try to think creative and outside the box. So if we have a team meeting or something like that, if there is a UA teacher who has an open slot, we might be able to put that team meeting during that particular time. We also have used the support of certified staff. Certified staff, it could be paras who have teaching degrees within our building, as well as all the other staff members that Mr. Olekna mentioned too, if we've needed them. But we do try to rotate them to keep that. But it's really nice when we do have substitutes in our building.
Okay, does that answer your question, Mr. Champagne? So I can let somebody else ask
Yes,
a
sir.
question? Okay, Mr. Garfalo?
Yes, I'm interested in numbers right now. For CLS, how many full-time classroom teachers are currently unavailable because of COVID or other illness? In other words, how many full-time classroom teachers are you short as of today?
So we have 2 classroom teachers that are on mandatory quarantine because of what happened this week. And they are able to teach. So they're teaching their class. So I'm not sure. I apologize, and Ms. Albertson are speaking for CLS, but so we're not short the teacher in that particular instance, but we do still need the adult supervision for one of the classes because the K-2 was everybody was theoretically in person, but for the 3 to 5 was still hybrid. So today presented with a class, everybody was present on Monday and Tuesday were quarantined, but we had some students that were here today for the first day this week. So therefore they didn't have an in-person teacher, but the same, the teacher who's on quarantine was still their teacher teaching them, even though they were in school, but also teaching her students that were quarantining that had been part of cohort A on Monday, Tuesday this week. But so we were short an adult to watch the students, but we weren't short a teacher. So, I will say that for, in-person people being out of the building because of appointments, sickness, whatever, not COVID sickness, but whatever, we were mid-teens for staff out of the building today. I think actually the number one of my office staff shared with me today was 18, and for tomorrow we had as of like 1 o'clock, 1:30, 13 scheduled out for tomorrow. And and here's the thing, that with the in-person, people are still have their regular lives of doctor's appointments and things like that. So as things are opening up, when we were all remote, people were able to kind of coordinate some of those appointments differently. And now, a lot of people just have appointments that they haven't been able to have, depending on their own personal preference or whatever, over the past year. So there's a lot of people just with regular appointments missing school for half a day here or half a day there. So it's not always the whole day that these people are out either, and they're entitled to have their appointments too. But so I'm sorry if it's a complicated answer, Mr. Garofalo, but so we're not with anybody like not able to teach right now at CLS.
At Bungay School, Mr. Garofalo, at Bungay School, we have actually 2 positions that are long-term subs. One of them is filled with a long-term sub teacher, and the other one is filled with our building sub at the current time. We do have a teacher that's out on quarantine, and the position was filled, with a substitute.
So for you, then that's only one that's missing.
Yeah, right. There's only one that's missing right now because of COVID. Yes, quarantine.
I would just piggyback on that. If we looked not just within the K-5 classroom per se, but we have a school counselor who's out right now, and a special education teacher about to be out, that we have not been able to hire long-term substitutes for.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Harmling.
No, I don't have anything. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Hatfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have anything, but I just wanted to update or help Mr. Garofalo with, you could always check out the COVID live tracker on the website too, and it helps you to update that information under COVID-19. And I found it to be very useful for myself when somebody has questions or whatnot, and I go look at the tracker and they update it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Kubik.
I have no questions at this time.
Okay, Mrs. Nesteriak.
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Stanek.
The one question I had has been answered, so I have nothing further.
Okay, and I do not have a question at this time. So, Mr. Wilson, I believe the middle school administrators are up next.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Stramello. Mrs. Roden?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good evening. So, basically we're right in the middle. I'm just going to explain what that means in terms of how our school setting has looked this year. While our students are not rotating through the building as much as the high school students are, we're also not as contained as our elementary students are. So we've had a very nice return. We have approximately 270 students in the building on each cohort day, and they stay on their teams. But there is times when the students are together during their unified arts classes. They are still we have them sit by teams in the cafeteria, but both teams are in the same cafeteria, spaced out. And we have, specific data for anyone who has questions for that as well. We're very anxious to get everybody back in. Our teachers and staff are very anxious to have everyone return. We are having another round of students return on Monday. based on our previous criterion that we had discussed in January as well. So we have 40 more children coming back in for 5 days on Monday. Our students they're very good about with their masks. And I know when we started way back in August and everyone said, oh, with, just our middle school students and how do they do? They're diligent with their masks. They help out with they clean their desks after every class. They're very good about that as well. When Mr. Alekna was saying it's all hands on deck, it truly is, from our parents to our custodians, to our students, to our staff, everyone. So, our safety is always number one for all the students on all levels, whether it's related to COVID-19 or anything else that's going to come into play. And I'd have to say, we've seen success safety-wise with this right now. And I know there are other concerns that we will discuss, but we're happy with how our students and our staff have been doing. So thank you for allowing us to have the chance to speak tonight.
Okay, Mrs. Freemuth, are you going to add anything, or you're just going to have Mrs. Roden be fine?
I don't have too much to add. I would say the same thing. I think we're, of course, enjoying having the students back in the building. We know with some of the ones that we've brought back in the first phase and those who are returning even as early as Monday of next week, some of the students not only are eager to get back, but some students have seen great success in a short period of time being in the building with their classroom teachers and back on team. It has been the best forum for them, making that transition back from the remote learning, which some truly struggled with. And I know you all know that from some of our conversations, even Monday night. So our teachers are continuing to do everything that we had done, even starting the school year back in September, to keep our students safe, and just reminding the students of our expectations to keep our distancing and keep healthy practices in place. And we remind them often that as long as we continue to do that, we can be in the building together.
Okay, thank you. And it's a semi apology to our two assistant elementary principals. I did not mean just to jump at the Mrs. Freemuth, but I figured that since you had two with Mr. Alekna and Mrs. Feige, I wanted to make sure that it was even at the middle school also. So now I will start with the questions in the reverse order. Mr. Stanek, any question for the middle school administration?
Thank you, Mr. Stramillo. I do not have any questions.
Okay. Mrs. Nesteriak,
No, I don't have any questions.
Mr. Kubik,
I don't have any questions.
Mr. Hatfield,
Not at this time, thank you.
Ms. Harmeling.
Nope, nothing from me. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Garofalo,
No questions.
Mr. Champagne,
Nothing here, thank you.
Mrs. Bruno.
I'm going to break the trend. I do have questions. It would be helpful also for the middle school to have some data around class sizes. And then I'm just wondering, Mr. Alekna talked about some of the logistic things. Are you beginning to anticipate and problem solve some logistics as you get ready to bring kids back in April?
So, Mrs. Bruno, our average class size right now is about 23 students. We had asked teachers to, share data for class sizes, classrooms that currently had 20 students physically in our building on a certain day, and we or over. And at the current time, we had 1, 2, 3, 4 who had 20 or over currently. For anticipation, I'm going to be completely honest. When we originally in August, before we knew we were coming into the hybrid model, we basically had everything set for full return. So it's kind of just been, we've been hanging out there. So we're ready when it is. We had stocked the classrooms to the capacity of desks that we thought we may need. and measured out, it would be, and it is currently, because they are full, but it would be a 3x3 space for the students. But that was, we knew that back in August, if we were, with all the students in the classrooms. And the one area we learned to adjust was in the cafeteria, because we keep 100 students in, which was the guidelines from the state, but we have overflow eating area in our foyer so that the students could be socially distanced on, in both spaces. So
And I would just add too, even using the cafeteria space, even for breakfast, we've gotten more strict about students sitting with teams, whereas before they would just come in and sit, with a sixth grader sits with their eighth grade friend or whatever. But, we've been more vigilant about those things too, especially in the event that we would have to do any kind of contact tracing. We know where students are and who they're with. And we certainly have the challenges that the elementary schools continue to have too in coverage. It's natural that that happens as the year goes on too. We are lucky we have one, we do have a building sub and we do have a consistent sub who's been coming in for us, but there have been times too where we have had a large number of staff out, and there are coverages that we have to be creative with, but there's no longer practices such as splitting kids on, in a grade level and just putting them in multiple UAs or multiple teams. We cannot do that because we have to maintain as much of the cohorting within their teams as we can to maintain the safety.
Thank you.
Okay. Before we move on to the high school, which I believe is next, I just want to allay any suspicions about my part in this. And most of the questions that I was prepared, obviously, as the chairperson, I let other people go first. A lot of them were answered. I don't want to be considered a person who doesn't have any questions or doesn't seem to care, but it's just the way it works out. So I'm putting that out there. Mr. Freund, I believe you are up.
Thank you, Mr. Schmello. I'd like to begin by saying, I think all of us believe the best way that we could service our kids is to get them in full time. And it's been something that we've been studying since the start of this school year. So much so that I know at times my superiors have found me quite annoying in the way that I've been going about it and trying to explore different models and see what's best. And before I continue my explanation, I'd like to share with you some of the data from the Seymour High School. Currently, we have a student population of 617 students. Of the 617 students, 158 of them have chosen to be full distance learners. That's equivalent to 26% of the population. They're spread about equally across the grade levels, with the largest number of student distance learners in the 11th grade. With that, we've also been trying to invite our most needy students back sooner. We've invited 138 students back. Of the 138 students we've invited back, 84 have accepted. At the same time, we're inviting these students back. Since January 1st, we've had 82 students choose to go full distance learning. So there's been a lot of students coming in, students switching out. Our actual numbers, if you have the raw numbers, since before the new year, has increased distance learners by 58. There's the net increase since the start of the school year, since the start of the new year. As part of the investigations and trying to figure out whatever we could do to get the kids back, we measured the size of their classrooms. And based on the dimensions of the Seymour High School classrooms, in order for us to maintain 3 feet of spacing, not 6 feet, but 3 feet of spacing between our students, I could only fit 20 students in a classroom. And that's pretty general across the board. To give you an idea, I then investigated the numbers of classes. We have 221 classes that run at the high school. Of the 221 classes, I would have 88 classes that have more than 20 people should everyone return back to Seymour High School. So again, that's 88 classrooms where I could not maintain 3 feet of separation. If the students who chose to be full distance continue to be full distance, that number drops down to 47. Classrooms would still have more than 20 students. That's equivalent to 21% of the classes in the high school. I could not maintain 3 feet of spacing. I just want to reiterate that. A required subject area, as we all know, and has been for a long time, is our English classes. In our English classes, we have, if everyone were to return back, 67% of the English classes would have more than 20 students in each one. And even if the students who have chosen distance learning stay distance learning, it's still 53% of the English classrooms are more than 20 students, which means, again, I can't see for the spacing between them. It's just impossible. So we've looked at that, and while looking at this and studying the various configurations, the biggest issue at the high school besides this is that every time that bell leaves or rings, I have my 617 students leave the classrooms, enter a hallway, and then intermingle while they find one of the 221 classes that they'll attend next. In other words, they're literally like atoms being released in a room, bouncing off walls, going down halls, going into bathrooms, going everywhere. That's pretty hard, especially when it comes to contact tracing. Since we've had 35 student cases of COVID, I've had 8 staff cases of COVID. I've had, one day we had 12 faculty out for quarantine. And during that time, I actually had to use secretaries to help us cover classrooms, and administrators. And, you know, I just have to, Mrs. Sarah LeBlanc, the secretary at the high school, is phenomenal when it comes to cover. And my faculty are phenomenal because they give up their time to help us cover classes. And it's because of their efforts and their dedication to our school that we're able to survive as well as we do without the proper number of subs for coverage. Currently, I have 2 teachers out on quarantine. Then lunch. In my lunchroom, it's about the same size as the middle school's lunchroom. I can fit approximately 100 students in there, 100 students in there, but just remember that those are round tables. They have, I want to say, probably an 8-foot diameter. While the students are eating lunch, they're about 4 feet apart with no mask. And actually, lunch is probably the scariest part of the day for us. Right now, we're able to maintain the numbers in all of our classes in a hybrid model of less than 20. My largest cohort size currently is 18 in the business department. And that would be followed up by 17 in social studies and 17 in math. So the hybrid model right now is helping us maintain the 3 feet of separation in our classrooms. In the lunchroom, there's no way I could maintain any sense of, you know, social distancing should we bring back the 459 students who want to be in school every single day. I would have to go over 100 in each of the cafeterias, and I really do not have a great place for them. The only place that we might be able to use is the media center, which is down the hall. It has carpeting in there, and that creates its own problem when you're talking about food, transportation of food, as well as supervision. So it's the size of our classes, the number of times the students have to transfer and mix themselves up in the hallway, eating lunch in the cafeteria. These are all things that make, you know, returning in full quite scary, to be honest with you. And although I feel it would be best to service the kids all in at once, in order to, you have to consider the factors of what I would call the factors of acceptable risk. Is it an acceptable risk to put so many kids so close together, constantly moving amongst each other throughout the day? And you think about all the sacrifice our students have already made, the sacrifice the school has made to get through this pandemic to now. And my only concern is that we really pull the Band-Aid off now. Is that going to do that sacrifice justice? Because we've given a lot. Our students have given a lot. Our families have given a lot. And I would hate just to throw all that they gave away. Thank you very much.
Mr. Lucky, would you like to add to your partner there?
I think Mr. Freund has done a lot of research into these things and spent many hours doing this research. And I think it behooves the board to take into consideration everything he said today. It's not an easy decision whether to bring the kids back or not for their safety, but in my opinion, I want them all back. We all want them all back, and to see the improvement of the kids who are back right now is, for most of them, is like night and day compared to being full remote. So that, that's a sacrifice in and of itself by not having them there. But obviously we have to deal with the medical safety concerns. So I agree with everything Mr. Freund said, and it is a difficult decision the board needs to make. Thank you.
Okay, I will start this time the questioning with Mr. Hatfield.
None of this time.
Okay, Ms. Harmling.
Yes, thank you. Hold on, sorry. So, the research and the numbers with the number of classes over 20 and how many fit into the classroom with 3 feet of difference is all completely commendable and it's easy to follow. What's a little confusing to me is why it's being served up as if it's new, right? All of this information was available or could have been known in September. And that would have given us ample time to have figured out how we needed to accommodate and use different spaces and areas of our school so that there would be fewer kids within 3 feet of each other, and ideally even more than that. Our school used to house so many more students. We were combined with Oxford before we had the new science wing. So the notion that we are lacking space in the high school is a tough one for me. We need to use that space creatively. And if the problem, as it is in all our schools, is adults to supervise children, we have grant money for that. I don't understand why we're not just automatically saying, okay, the new substitute rate is $20 or $25 an hour. Supply and demand, you pay more, you get more. So I respect all the work that went into these numbers, but this isn't new information. We're in hybrid mode now. Wasn't the plan always to come back full time? Wasn't that always what we were striving for? So the fact that it's February and we're talking now like, oh my gosh, we're never going to be able to do it is upsetting and it's troubling. And when we started out this meeting tonight, first of all, I didn't know we were going to hear status updates from all the administrators, and that's great. But I thought we were going to be talking about the reopening plan. And the reopening plan was voted on by the board in December. The board upheld the plan, 2 different votes at a January meeting. So this idea that then all of a sudden the plan was revamped in collaboration with the board is demonstrably false. The school system is now enacting a plan that is not the plan the board voted on. And I will say that it was a great addition to that plan to have the students in the elementary schools phased back in, K2 and then 3 to 5. That's a great plan. Frustrating if you have a 3rd to 5th grader, absolutely. But it makes perfect sense so that the whole system can acclimate itself to more students. But what that has to do with the middle school not being open until the middle of April is beyond me. The middle and the high school could have also started with 1 or 2 grades coming in first, give it a week or 2 and the other grades come back. We have to figure this out. Our kids need to be in school.
Okay, Mr. Garofalo.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've said this before, and I guess I'm just going to repeat myself. What the students have lost is irreplaceable. We cannot reproduce time. We cannot reproduce lost opportunities. If we continue on the path that we have taken to this point, I shudder to think what this generation will have as a bankable education for the future. And Mr. Freund, let me ask you this. Have you surveyed the students themselves? and ask them. We've heard whether they prefer to come back or not. We have heard from the board student representative who encouraged the board to have the students come back. But have any comments come forward from the students themselves as to what their preference is?
I haven't surveyed them directly, but I believe that the increase, like every issue and every side, you have two sides to it. And the fact that we've had 82 students choose to go full distance since the start of the school year is an indication to me that there's a portion of the population that absolutely it does not want to be here in circumstances that would expose them to certain conditions. And a lot of them, there's health compromised students and family members. I know of one in particular who the child's been full distance all year for those reasons. So there's, I haven't given a survey directly, but I believe that the indication of 158 students currently being out full would be an indication that there's the mixed consent on that. It's not one-sided. And again, we would like nothing more to get the kids back in. That's one of the reasons why we've devoted so much time to looking at various models and considering various factors and looking at different locations within the building to try to do that. And in my presentation, I talked about the terminology acceptable risk. We used a standard of 3 feet of separation. If it is acceptable to have them closer, 1.5 feet, let's say, yeah, we could bring them all in, but it's all dependent upon, the guidance that we receive and what the board deems as an acceptable risk.
All right, I'm going to stop here for now, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Champagne.
I don't have anything for the high school now.
Okay, Mrs. Bruno.
Thank you for all the data. I didn't have to ask about class sizes, and thank you for trying to speak, Mr. Lucky and Mr. Freund, from the perspective of students too. I have a couple questions and then a general comment. How long is passing time between each class?
We reduced it from 5 minutes to 4 minutes this year. We have split hallways and we have one directional stairways so the students, we try to minimize passing each other.
So that's unlikely to meet the 15-minute standard for contact tracing.
No, we've already calculated that. Yes, that's the reasons why we've changed our schedule from the 8-drop-2 schedule to the 4x4 block to minimize hall passing time.
Okay. And then you highlighted in particular the size of English classes and the challenge of bringing, and we are in budget season. I would like to know, and our decisions around budget have consequences that directly impact kids. Has there been a reduction in FTE for the English department in recent years?
Yes, there has. When Mrs. Anthony retired, she hasn't been replaced. Although this year in the budget, we had proposed to bring in a part-time English teacher to help supplement that.
I think it's really important as we move forward with the budget that we're really upfront with the public and with the town about the impact of unfilled positions and those changes. So I just want to highlight that, and you'll be hearing about that from me for the next few months. Just to follow up on what some of the other board members have said, I believe kids need to be in school. I think the open and honest conversation at the curriculum committee about the kids who are struggling and what it means for them to be back in school. It involves administrators taking some risks and putting that data out there. And I'm really glad we had the conversation because I think it's going to drive some important work. My thoughts are, I don't know why we're waiting to bring the middle school in. As administration said, everything's set. They've anticipated all of the logistic things. I think we can work to bring middle school kids back before April 12th. They really need it. As far as the high school goes, you know, I support choice. So maybe we look at a three option model. So kids can choose to stay in hybrid, kids can be all distance, or kids can be full in, and that may give you some of the leeway to be able to hit that 20 number in 3 foot distance. So those are just some ideas I had.
If I could address one of those ideas.
Sure, go ahead, Mr. Freund.
Thank you. When you look at some, there are some high schools that are back in full. And when you look at those high schools that are back in full, they have typically anywhere from 40 to 60% of their students on full distance learning by choice. Currently, we're at 26%. If I had similar percentage as they did, we would be able to provide the space. But right now, we have a lot of students who want to be in our school. And again, it's a percentage game. So when you look at other high schools that are open and full, please consider the percentage of that student population that is hybrid. I know one that is 60% of the students out on hybrid, not hybrid, but full distance.
But
So they
if
can open.
allowing, I'm sorry, if allowing the third choice of hybrid for kids who wanted to continue to come in 2 days, 3 days, and then be remote the other days, I'm wondering if that would help.
Again, it's a puzzle. I've been working on it for months, and I've been working with the superintendent, associate superintendent, as well as the administrators in our building. And it's not a puzzle we're going to stop working on. So we're not going to give up.
Mrs. Nesteriak, you're up next.
No, I don't have any questions at this time.
Okay, Mr. Stanek.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Freund, Mr. Lucky, Ms. Harmeling raised the issue of the size of the high school, and at one time, the high school, even when it was much smaller, had 1,200 students back in the 1970s. What can be done, if anything, to spread out the students in the school more, given the number of classes and the constraints of the number of teachers that we have? Can something be done?
So currently, again, you're correct. When I first started at Seymour High School, we had 1,100 students, and that was 2004. We've seen a student decline all along. At that time, we had teachers on carts, pushing them down the hallways, going from one class to another. The dilemma isn't the sheer number of rooms, it's the size of the rooms. If you were to look at your typical high school classroom, it's quite small. And when you consider the typical size of your high school student, they're quite large. We do, so back in 2004, when I first started, we had teachers sharing classrooms. We had teachers on carts, and the students were packed into the classrooms. Now, we're in the situation where we're trying not to put as many kids in a particular class. Then we have to look at the spaces available that are larger, that allow us to host larger classes. We have the auditorium. We have the media center. And in the media center, we figure we could host probably 3 classes. To be honest with you, after you get past those 3 areas, you're talking in the weight room, which I don't think anyone wants to have a class in a weight room. Then you're talking maybe the gymnasium, but then what are you going to do with the gym classes? So the number of large instructional spaces available to us is very small. Although we have lots of classrooms, we don't have a large space to create the space that we would need for the 88 classes that would be that large, the 88 out of the 221 classes.
Mr. Stanek, you said.
Because we looked at that.
Okay, I think that answers my question for now. Thank you.
Okay, now I'm going to assume, Mr. Wilson, that we're either going to have Dr. Curtis go first, or are we going to have Mrs. Bennett go first? Is it ladies before gentlemen, or is it a doctor before a nurse?
Point of order, Mr. Stramello.
Yes.
Could I just ask what the topic is? Because I would really like to engage in some additional board conversation. I guess I just don't know what, our agenda is so open-ended that I want to make sure we're able to continue this discussion about reopening the middle school and the high school earlier than April 11th.
Okay, that's never been out of my mind, Ms. Harmling.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure you weren't moving on thinking the board was done with this conversation, that's all.
No.
Okay.
But I have Dr. Curtis who's taking his time to come to us, and Mrs. Bennett who's working overtime. So, Mr. Wilson, I posed that question to you. Who's going to go first?
Well, I think a lot of the information they'll probably share is the same, but I think if Head Nurse Bennett would like to start, and then Dr. Curtis, if anything he would like to add and or answer any questions the board may have, that's why he was invited this evening and took the time out to come. But I think that would be an appropriate order. This way he has heard from everyone on the call prior to him making, and once again, Dr. Curtis, thank you for making the time. So Nurse Bennett.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'll keep it quick. I know that there's discussion to be had. I just wanted to say that overall, I think that us bringing back the kids has been going well. Like a few people have mentioned, we've had a few hiccups, but I think it's been a great learning experience. I think we've greatly improved on our contact tracing. I think we've gotten very extensive with it, and we've been able to really minimize who we've had to quarantine, because we do take that serious. It's not just missing school, it's missing everything for that time frame. So I think the nurses and the administration has worked really hard with us to work on contact tracing and minimizing that. I know myself, I've learned a lot of data lately in regards to middle school, high school, on why our surrounding schools are remaining hybrid, and in our DPH, some of the reasons. And some of the reasons they've shared more recently is the increased virus noted to be in the nares of the older students and the shedding of the virus, and the more forceful. They're more forceful when they tend to speak or talk, is one of the things that was shared with us on our state level DPH meeting. So that was a new informational fact that I've learned for myself in regards to the elder students. I think our quarantine numbers have gone down. Currently, we have 71 students in quarantine in Seymour and 8 staff, as you know, per our tracker. But otherwise, I think, like I said, busing has been a little bit of difficulty, because when we have our elementary school students, all you see is a big C and you see the top of their heads. So it's very difficult to identify the students sitting in the seats because you could barely even recognize their faces. I mean, we're trying to match coats. That's how detailed it is and how hard we're working to minimize quarantine. But I appreciate all the help of the administration and staff, because this has truly been a team project. If you guys have any questions for me, otherwise I will turn it over to Dr. Curtis.
Any questions for Mrs. Bennett first? Mr. Champagne, did I see your hand?
Yes. I was just curious because I know there's been a lot of questions around how we do contact tracing and what is involved in that, and primary and secondary and tertiary contacts. Maybe you could give us a Reader's Digest version on how we do that at the highest level.
Sure. So I'll start with the elementary school level. So in the elementary school, because the students remove their masks on an average of 3 times a day, and that's the low average. They tend to eat breakfast, lunch, and snack in the classroom. I've timed it out to be about an hour or more without their masks on. We've decided at state level with the DPH that it was best to quarantine just that classroom. Now, when I say just that classroom, it doesn't necessarily mean the staff in the classroom, because if the staff stays apart in the front of the room or worked with a student on the opposite side of the room, then we don't have to minimize our staff. But students, because they have all their masks off, they're eating and they're moving around the room. That's why we have to quarantine the classroom. Elementary school, we're able to be more extensive with the bus. We are now, if necessary, depending upon timing, we may quarantine the bus just till we can watch the bus videos. And then we're watching the videos and we're quarantining just the 2 seats in front, the 2 seats behind, and the 2 seats to the side of the infected person. And that's how it works at the elementary school level. At the middle school level and the high school level, we're able to get much more extensive. We are pulling seating charts from every single classroom. We're locating the infected person, and we're only quarantining 6 feet around that infected person at both those levels. Same thing on the bus. We watch the bus, which again, it's a little bit easier because now they're bigger, their heads are above the seat, so it's easier to identify. But we are just quarantining the 2 seats in front, to the side, and behind. Come March 8th, we will have seating charts in place on the bus, which I myself really look forward to because I think it's going to be very helpful. And I think the staff, we do a lot of education with the staff. I try to go around and talk to the staff on it's very important to try to teach in the front of the room. And yes, students do need help. So if they call and you need to go over and work with them, that's fine. Just keep in mind that 15 cumulative minutes. So, you can go over and walk away and maybe it could be something they can do in the front of the room, but that's been able to help us spare staff from having to be quarantined. So again, I think we've only gotten more creative. I think we've only got better with the process. I think we're learning more as with this virus that's ever changing. As you know, the data changes every day as we know our travel restrictions. But that is how we follow, and that's the policy we've been following in regards to quarantining.
Okay, any other questions for Mrs. Bennett? Mrs. Nesteriak, I see you.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hit quick. This is Beth Nasir. Becky, do you have any data on the transmission rate in the schools by school?
So we have been able to locate and break it down to, so there's never any specific data. You think you can break it down to that's the only place that the transmission could have occurred because there was no outside exposures, nobody else was positive, but there's no 100% in that. I think for each school, last time I looked at the data, we've been able to locate down to about 2 to 3 transmissions that we think either occurred in school or on a bus. But most of our transmissions, what happens is and that we even see this in the news, it's starting from like a family exposure and they don't realize it. And then the student is coming to school or even the staff member is exposed to a family member and bringing it in. I have to say, when we use our mitigating factors like the masks, when we're wearing masks, I have not been able to find any transmission occur with masks on, which I think has been very helpful in our school district. So I'm a big believer in if we could keep those masks on, but this is where we struggle in the elementary school. We remove them so often. And again, they're little, so it's like you can't expect a little kid to keep a mask on all day. I know the challenge of that. But as for another transmission that we knew for sure that occurred was on a bus. And I tend to think you get a little bit sloppier on a bus, when you're in a classroom and you're being monitored by your teacher. And I know myself, I still walk around the room at the school and I'm saying, hey guys, pull up that mask, pull up that mask. So you have people reminding them, I don't think that's on the bus. And like Dave had mentioned prior, when we watch these bus videos, sometimes we sit there and we're like, oh God, we wish we didn't see that, So there is some work still to be done. Educating. I know March 8th, when we have the bus seats, we're going to talk about even just reinforcing and reminding for protection to wear the mask. But like I said, I think there's been, again, that you cannot say 100%, right? But there's been at least a couple in each building or the bus situations.
Thank you. And with the weather warming up, has there been a movement to move any of those eating times that you're saying are higher risk outside?
Absolutely. So we do have tents. We purchased them prior to the beginning of the school year. And I know that Tim and them are looking to put them back up again with the tents. And I thought that was just going to be a great, easy fix. I was going to send everybody outside to eat. And then it's like, well, they had to be 20 feet from the building here and 50 feet from where you park and then 75 feet from here. And it's like, some places there was like, we were putting them, I swear, down the road. So it wasn't that simple, but as we are planning that. I've even talked to teachers about maybe having kids bring in their own like beach towel so that even if we went out on the blacktop and made it like a picnic. So I do think come warmer weather, that's definitely going to help us for mask breaks, for gym. We have the field where they can run without their mask, and eating. I think that we could definitely find ways to be creative. And that's the thing about this virus is that we just have to be creative with this. We can't disregard our mitigating factors. And this is one thing I've been saying. We know mask wearing is important. We know social distance is important. These are all really important things that we want to get kids back in school. We need to get kids back in school. We just need to be creative about how we do it. So we're not just throwing these mitigating factors that we've worked so hard to achieve and maintain all this time. Because I do have to say, I think overall, and when you look at our real-time tracker, we've done a good job, and overall we've kept kids and staff safe in Seymour. And I think everybody is to thank for that. So
thank you.
Any other questions for, yes, Mrs. Bruno?
Thank you so much. Looking at the tracker has been really helpful, and we've had some conversations about total cases And it would be helpful to see sort of the trend of daily cases with the phase lines of when we were in hybrid and when we were in full remote. To see that would be really helpful to see how things have changed from day to day and season to season. My other question, because the board has had these conversations throughout the year, what is the most recent transmission rate for the town of Seymour?
So currently we are still at a 20.3. We're actually at 20.3 last week. We remain at 20.3. The case rate just changed. It was 23 cases one week, 24, and now it flip-flop. It was like 24 cases, 23.
Okay.
The DPH reported in our meeting yesterday that as the Valley, we're still slightly, our rate is slightly above the state rate for the Valley. And they are seeing a few more students. So it tends to be a few more students right now than it is adults. That was for the health department. And as for that data, Mr. Wilson, are we able to share that graph that I put together today in regards to positivity with students and staff since August?
We could put that on the shared folder. Yes, we'll put that on the shared folder.
So Ms. Bruno, in response to your question, we did put together today with all the schools, and it goes by August to current, and it shows students, staff with totaling in each direction, and it shows you the hottest months, the hottest schools, and it shows you our positivity numbers broken down.
Great, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else with a question for Mrs. Bennett? Okay, I have a question, Mrs. Bennett, and clarification about the, because you spoke about the elementary school, the high school rate of, because as we know, some of our high school, and I think some of our athletes watch on TV and see the athletes that are supposed to have masks on, not having masks on when they're sitting on the bench. And at the end of the game, when they're sharing fist bumps or stuff, not having the masks on or stuff. So they're getting poor examples from the college and the pro level there. Is the high school rate higher than the elementary, even though the high school kids are smarter?
So our data shows that our high school rate right now is that we've up to date since when we've started keeping this in January, we've had 35 positive cases of students in the high school, which is higher than our other schools. Middle school is right behind with 29. So that's almost double our younger schools. So we're seeing a little bit higher of a trend. I think mask wearing in sports, I think sports is really important. I think kids participate in sports. I'm happy we're doing sports. I think it's really important that we're careful with sports because that was, and I'm sure Dr. Curtis will, talk about also, but the cardiac clearance and the myocarditis, the inflammation around the heart muscle that we're seeing in student athletes is concerning. So that's why we want them to play sports, but we want them to do it safely because we don't want to see our high school students, go for cardiac clearance and end up with a long-term heart problem, because that's the scariest thing with this virus is that we're learning so much. And I can tell you right now, I think we're going to learn in a year from now more about this virus. So we're doing everything we can to protect them now, and regardless of what these athletes do, and they may be more expendable they feel they're more expendable, but it's our job to just make sure we play the sports, we wear the mask, we do it right, and this way we don't have to worry about these cardiac issues with especially our middle school and our high school athletes.
Okay, I would just follow up a little bit. I don't want to just single out, and I see your hand, Ms. Harlan. It's not just our athletes. I'm sure that there are some of our other high school students are partying in larger numbers or gathering in larger numbers than they're supposed to. So I don't want to just single out athletes. So I just wanted to put out that. Ms. Harmon.
Well, I actually would like to push back a little bit. I don't think we should say that high school students are getting it more because they're partying. High school students have cars, they have jobs, they have more responsibilities. They're out and about more because they're older. So I guess I want to make sure, Mr. Stramello, that your comments aren't misinterpreted by the community, because yes, it is true that our high schoolers there are more high schoolers who have had COVID than there are little ones. But to Mrs. Bennett's point, the instances of in-school or on-bus transmission are between 3 and 5 district-wide. So the relationship between high school kids getting COVID more often than younger kids may or may not have anything at all to do with school or sports or partying. It probably has to do with gathering with friends, but I just don't think we should characterize it as partying. And I also think we need to acknowledge that there are many high school students who are working. So the dynamics are different, but I think it all goes back to the phrase factors of acceptable risk, right? For our little ones, they have more time without the mask. For our older ones, they have less social distancing. So for me, it's all about being transparent and empowering families to understand what the risk factors are and to make the decision that's right for them. And at the end of the day, we're still not giving those middle school and high school families a choice.
Okay, any other questions from Mrs. Bennett? Okay, Dr. Curtis, thank you.
Thank you. So I just like to kind of echo what Nurse Bennett said. I think that the plan they put in place that they presented to me seems really cohesive and has followed the guidelines from the Department of Public Health and the CDC and the like. And especially after hearing Principal Freund's presentation about the social distancing if the entire school comes back, you know, I think it is something we need to keep in mind. It's true if you look at the rates of COVID in the community and, you know, that it's coming down considerably. And I don't think we really know exactly why that is. You know, some of it's the social distancing. Some of that may be the vaccine, although there probably isn't enough vaccinated people to make that happen. And some of that may be just the natural history of this virus. It's had, you know, 3 peaks so far. And so we don't know what the future holds. And I think the fact that we've come down to about the point, you know, we're still not down to where we were in the fall. The fact that we're at this point to rush into opening everything too soon, I think we'll regret later. So that's all I would say from my standpoint.
Any questions for Dr. Curtis? Okay, any questions for Dr. Curtis one more time? Thank you, Dr. Curtis.
I had one.
Oh,
I had a couple.
where are you? Oh, now I see. You see, the screen moved you, so I lost you. Modern technology.
I guess, could you speak to, I know both the American Academy of Pediatrics and the CDC have statements regarding reopening schools. And also knowing that anxiety and depression are medical conditions and certainly something we're hearing reported about kids due to not being able to be in school as they're used to. Could you speak a little bit to recommendations about that?
Well, I mean, I think everybody knows that, you know, the AAP especially has said that, you know, as much as possible, kids should be in school, fully engaged in their social, you know, their social situations, their extracurricular activities, and that kind of thing. At the same time, the school needs to be able to do that in a safe manner. So I think there's a balancing act there. You know, I think that the plan that's been put in place to me seems a pretty logical situation that they're kind of navigating between those two opposing forces of trying to get as many kids in school as recommended as possible, at the same time protecting them and not being too cavalier. Because I think that even though that the numbers have come down and our mitigation strategies have worked, you know, they've worked because we've been all social distancing, we've been using the masks, et cetera. I think of just in the general population, some people have tried to downplay COVID, you know, but 500,000 people have died from it. And that's with all these mitigation strategies we have in place. If we were like we are during a normal flu season where everybody comes in and you know, who knows what we would have. So that's why I just think that, yes, there are those recommendations to get kids in school in person as much as possible. And at the same time, we need to do it in a safe manner.
You have a follow-up, Mrs. Bruno?
Just if you could speak to, you know, what you're seeing in the Valley in terms of increased mental health concerns with our
Okay.
students
Yeah.
and any strategies you would want the board to think about in order to support those students.
Yeah, so I think that definitely that's something to think about. And some of them are, there's definitely isolation is a big part of it. Not having their sports or activities or, dance or whatever it is a big part of it. I think some of it is just the fear of COVID. I've had plenty of kids come in as schools are starting to open up. Their parents are coming in because their kids' anxiety is ramped up because the kids are scared of actually going back to school and being there. So I think unfortunately, I don't know if there's a policy that the board could do. I think it's something that we have to do individually with the kids. I think that a lot of the teachers are really good because they have their relationship with their kids and they know which kids are vulnerable to these kinds of things. I'm not sure if I could think, I'd have to sit down and really think about how a school system could put a policy in place that would help with those mental health issues, which are considerable because of this virus.
Okay, Mrs. Bruno? Okay, that's all of the presentations. Mr. Wilson, you are up again.
So thank you to all who presented this evening. Obviously, I think Dr. Curtis summed it up the best after listening to everyone present in that it is a fine line. While we all want our students back, we've said that all along. We have a plan to get all of our students back. And by doing it in a slow approach where we continually monitor the data, because the transitions at that secondary level are the cause for concern. The room spacing as well as the number of transitions. Obviously, what alleviates some people's anxiety is the vaccine, and no one here is banking on that, but it was a promise by the governor that March 1st, and working with our Naugatuck Valley Health District, it appears as that will be a reality. And I hope as soon as I said, once we have the official information on the number of doses and the date where we can get all of our staff vaccinated, if the sooner the better. Obviously, it would also help because then they no longer would have to quarantine in the event that someone were to test positive in the classroom. So I think all of those factors, plus, as I said, the guidance from Dr. Curtis, the guidance from Naugatuck Valley Health District, the guidance from our emergency management director is what led to this approach to a slow return to get all of our students back in full, which we're really excited about. And I would be remiss, Dr. Boyle joined as well, and I know he didn't get a chance to really share, but I wanted everyone to know he worked with all the team of administrators in identifying the population to bring back. And when students declined the first opportunity to bring back, he was also consulted with more students to add. So Dr. Boyle, if you wanted to add anything, but I didn't want you to just sit here and think that you were unnoticed. So you definitely were not. And I know you've been a part of this as well. So we're excited about the return, Mr. Stramello. We're excited about the slow return. We want to do it and get every student back and staff member to keep our students and staff as safe as we possibly can. And we feel that this approach and this plan that is presented does just that for the students and the community of Seymour.
Okay, did Dr. Boyle want to add any comments and to the?
Nothing specific other than, I've been available and consulting with the building administration on a very regular basis about our high needs population. I think the district on whole has done a really great job bringing those students back, and we're continuing to bring additional students back. As I believe Ms. Roden said, we have additional students coming back at the middle school level at the beginning of the week next week. I'm happy to answer questions about that part, but I think the primary focus has been on the more systemic return to school as opposed to the return for the high needs population. So,
Okay, do people have any questions for Dr. Boyle?
Mr.
Yes,
Chairman,
Mr. Garofalo.
I do not have a question for Dr. Boyle, but a thought just occurred to me, and I would like to pose the question to the good doctor, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
All right. Originally, we were informed that social distancing required 6 feet of space between individuals. Is there any recent science study or data that shows definitively that when masked, 6 feet must still be maintained?
I'm sorry, is this for me or do you want to ask Dr.
Yes,
Foyle?
that's for you.
Oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
that was for you, Dr. Curtis.
Okay, I wasn't sure. So I don't know of any specific data with that. I think a lot of these recommendations have been made from the CDC based on how far, respiratory droplets fall. And also the 15-minute kind of guideline has been from that too, but they're all guidelines. And the only way for someone to know for sure would be to put people in positions where they're less, than 6 feet, like say for 2 feet apart and more than 15 minutes, and another group that isn't, and see what transmission rates do. But of course, nobody's going to do that experiment. So I don't think that there is any data. I could certainly look for it, and I could email it to Nurse Bennett, and she could share it with the board next time.
It was more of curiosity because we have heard that regularly. I mean, even when I went for my 2 doses of vaccine, I'm old enough to have received those in the first phase. They were harping on the bubble, stand on the bubble, 6 feet apart, please, 6 feet apart, please. Everybody is masked. We're 6 feet apart. Nobody's coughing, nobody's sneezing. All conversations are through the mask. So that's what caused me to wonder if there were more recent data that definitively proved or led us to believe that 6 feet was gospel, even when wearing a mask.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think wearing a mask, allows you a closer amount, but I don't think there's any specific data because, like I said, to do that experiment would be not really possible to know. So.
Okay, all right.
Nurse Bennett, you had something?
Okay, I saw Ms. Harmley first, then Mrs. Bennett, I'll come to you.
Thank you, Mr. Schmo. I hear what Jim is saying, absolutely. And I'm always struck by, at the beginning of this pandemic, when we clearly did not know all of the things we know now, it was 6 feet or a mask. And that was the case for a long time. And then it became 6 feet and a mask, which is obviously going to be safer than 6 feet or a mask. So Mr. Garofalo, in a way, we could kind of flip your question on its head and ask if there are any studies that show how many people have gotten COVID while wearing a mask, right? Regardless of a 3 feet or a 6 feet or a 2 feet or 10 feet. So, and that I would be curious to know, are there studies that have shown of people who have contracted COVID to the best of their knowledge? Did they contract it while they were wearing a mask or not? So, Dr. Curtis, do you know if there are studies that speak to that?
I have not seen any studies of that nature. And like I said, I think that would be difficult because studies like that in medicine, a randomized placebo-controlled
study. It wouldn't be that kind of study. It would be more along the lines of contact tracing.
Yeah,
after the fact
I don't know. And I could again look it up for you if you like.
Yeah, no, definitely wouldn't be. I'm not talking about a true experimental study. Just when people are being diagnosed with COVID, do they ask, how do you think you got it? Do you think you were wearing masks? That would be the only way to go about getting that data.
Yeah, well, and even that is hard to then extrapolate from because people wear masks sometimes and not all the time, and you don't know exactly where you're exposed to it. So,
Okay, Mrs. Bennett.
Thank you. We have actually addressed that question on our DPH call. Dr. Lynn Sousa and Tom Sinclair, who are the head epidemiologists for our state, we've asked that question, and they said that masks are not foolproof and they're not guaranteed. And they have seen transmission occur with masks on multiple levels, multiple times reported at state level, which is why they are maintaining that 6 feet of distance with masks. Again, not all masks are as good as others, because I've seen people where they have like a thin cloth one, where I've seen respiratory aerosolization go right through it. Obviously the surgical masks, the KN95s are a little better, but those are not conducive for kids to wear all day. Those are like medical grade masks. So they have looked into that. There has been transmission. Another interesting fact that I've learned is that 15-minute rule cumulative is completely at rest. So when you're playing basketball, you're playing a sport, the DPH and the state CDC gets rid of that 15-minute guidance, because that 15 minutes is established based at an at-rest pattern. So when you're exerting yourself, there's more aerosolization is the word, and therefore that time changes. So that's why this guidance, it has got better. They have researched it, and often in our calls that we have with these lead epidemiologists, they do address these things. And Mr. Garfalo, your question has been asked, and these were the answers we received.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Garfalo, I thought I saw your hand.
No, that's all right. Thank you.
Okay. All righty. I'll ask, what is the board's pleasure at this particular time? Yes, Ms. Harmling.
So I'm not quite ready to make a motion, but if just under the broad topic of discussion, given all that we've talked about tonight, I would really like to see us move up the reopening of the middle school. I cannot understand why the date April 12th was selected. And if we do it like we've done the elementary school, so we bring 6th grade and one of the teams back in 7th grade, and then next week we bring back the other team and the 8th graders, and we started that process as early as the middle school is comfortable doing so, which it seems to me that March 8th, if we brought back 6th and half of 7th grade and then followed, and toss a coin for what 7th grade class needs to come, comes back first. I just don't see any reason why we're holding back on the middle school. I think sometimes we forget that the middle schoolers are by and large not teenagers. There are 11 and 12-year-olds at our middle school. And in our day, we would have been in 6th grade still, you know what I mean, at the elementary school level. So I'd like to kind of bifurcate our discussion or choices tonight and just kind of float the idea of talking about the middle school. And I'll leave it at that in case anybody else wants to chime in, and then I would be prepared to make a motion.
Anyone else wishing to follow up to Ms. Harmling's comment? Mrs. Bruno.
I said it earlier. I would agree. I'm not quite sure what the argument is for waiting a full month after 3, 4, 5 come back to bring back the middle school. I'm not sure, if we're doing 3 grades at a time, why that we would need to do individual grade levels at the middle school. And I think that's like, how do you choose which grade comes back first? So I think the board should discuss that a little bit more. And I also would like to discuss three options for high school students, even if we keep the timeline the same, 3 options, which may get the overall social distancing in a better place.
I agree with that.
Okay, Mr. Wilson, since you have the power according to the Commissioner of Education. You've heard the board.
Yes, so I definitely heard the board's pleasure. I think we can consider, I would do a slow approach at the middle school as opposed to a 6, 7, 8, because there are more students in a 6, 7, 8 than a K1, 2. So just be cognizant of that. So maybe to Ms. Harmeling's point, start with the 6th graders on the week of March 8th, and then possibly the week of the 15th, bringing back our 7th and 8th graders full. That would be a slow approach to them. In terms of the high school, Ms. Bruno, I understand the question, I guess, or the concept behind the three plans. However, the 3 plans would not really eliminate the number of students, because if someone were to come in hybrid, and be on the full, and or not the full, the numbers really wouldn't help us out there. I think having the two choices makes it more manageable for both the staff, administration, and for the students in terms of a consistency model. To give that third option would be hard to plan in terms of seating and passing times and all of that nature for contact tracing purposes. So I think that the high school approach for an April 12th date, I agree would still be a great date. But I would stick with the two models. Either the choice would be made because of either fear of the virus, as we've heard, and or parental choice and or students' own choice of having anxiety about coming back with the virus. We've heard many different things, and or to come back into school in full. And by April 12th, the good thing is we've heard about a couple of outdoor seating charts. We know our high schoolers would love to sit outside and eat, and having the ability to have that tent back up. I know in the beginning part of the year when that tent was up, a lot of our students took advantage of that. So that will help with the cafeteria issues for Mr. Freund, Mr. Lucky, and Mr. DeStacy as well. But I think that third option would really complicate things from an administrative point of view of knowing who's in the building, who's not in the building, as opposed to just saying, if we're open on April 12th, the choice to come back on April 12th, and or the choice to say temporary full distance learning, which it's still called temporary, obviously per the state. So I would say that I think that those two are doable, Mr. Stramello, since you asked. And that would be the thing that I think we could support as administrators, in terms of it would give that slow approach at the middle school because they have those two separate areas and they're controlled by teams and there's less movement. But at the high school, because those movements are so large, I think we would be wise to wait and obviously, hopefully, and as I said, it's not contingent upon the vaccine, but hopefully the vaccine is in all of our teachers by then. And when I mean not only dose 1, but dose 2 as well. So that would be something I would be able to support, Mr. Stramello, to answer your question.
Okay, Ms. Harlan, before you come in, I like that suggestion, Mr. Wilson, but I would also like other board members to speak. Not that I'm trying to cut off Ms. Harmling, but I'm not hearing from other board members on a suggestion by Mr. Wilson to move the middle school back earlier. So I'll start with Mrs. Bruno. You did support that, so I can jump over you if you don't mind and go to Mr. Champagne. What is your feeling? And we're not voting; we're discussing.
Well, we.
The high school scares me more than the middle school. The population is much higher.
What is that?
I don't. I believe it is, Ms. Harmeling.
No, it isn't. It's one additional grade, and then you lose children who have gone to alternative and private high schools, and it's a much bigger school for that additional grade. So it's.
I don't believe the middle school has 600 students.
Okay, let's not argue, please.
It's a discussion, Mr. Stramello, but
Well,
there's one
okay,
additional grade in the high school.
But unfortunately, point of order through the chair. Go ahead, Mr. Champagne.
So I mean, I wouldn't totally object that, the elementary schools, they're their own buildings. They shouldn't have too much impact on other buildings. We have the K through 2 back. The only interaction that I see between, middle school and say an elementary school would just be siblings. So I think of bringing that date up earlier with somewhat of a more accelerated phased approach to that wouldn't be terrible. With that being said, the high school and the class sizes and whatnot, that still makes me extremely nervous.
Okay, Mr. Garfalo.
I would like to see the middle school back as quickly as possible, meaning if superintendents plan to bring them back within a week of each other, given the circumstances, we're not going to go back 100% in person. So what is the lesser of two evils? I'll accept that plan.
Okay, Ms. Harmling,
So two things. I think we should just keep the discussion of middle school and high school separate. So I would like to make a motion. I actually have one other question for you. Mr. Stramello, you alluded to the power that I don't know who you said gave to the superintendent. I think that we gave the power to the superintendent. I don't know. Can you confirm that it came from the state? And because I'm
Well,
not.
actually, I do. I have a letter here from Attorney Dugas that speaks to that point.
Well, if you could share that with us, because like I said, we voted on a plan and that plan has been ignored, and that troubles me as a board member.
Okay, I can get you the letter from Mr. Dugas.
Well, could you speak to it now so we know?
Oh, would you like me to read it? Would you like me to read it?
So we know our direction for the rest of the evening.
Okay. While the governor via executive order and the commissioner of education via guidance permitted an alternate to full in-class instruction during the COVID-19 pandemic, neither articulates who is between the superintendent and the Board of Education authority makes such decisions. Since the right is not specifically reserved in the board and the superintendent is responsible by statute, Connecticut General Statutes 10-157 for the day-to-day operations of the school, it is our belief that the authority to make such decisions resides in the superintendent. We note that in our experience, most, if not all of the districts we are involved with, such decisions have been made by a superintendent in most cases after consulting with the board, which is technically what we have done.
Sort of. We did make
Well,
motions
you know,
that accepted the plan.
Okay. Your
We did.
opinion, sort of, my opinion, we have. So
I'm
we-
sorry, it's not my
we disagree.
opinion. We made a
Well,
motion that
we
there
could
would be a
disagree.
plan and it was
We
ignored.
could disagree, Ms. Harmon, we could disagree on the definitions of the word. And, you know, I would
Mr.
like to stop
Stramello,
that.
Mr.
I would
Stramello,
like-
Mr. Stramello, I have a voice and I am an elected official in equal measure as you, and I would like to complete my thought. We are not disagreeing on an opinion that was in the letter. We are disagreeing on a fact, which is really unusual. We voted as a board 3 times on a plan that was ignored. That's a fact. That plan was not enacted that we voted on. So just let that be the fact. So my question to the rest of my board members is there a point in voting if the superintendent can do what he wills? I think we should vote on a middle school plan at a minimum because we seem to have some buy-in there. So I would like to make a motion that we direct the superintendent of schools to move up a phased-in reopening of the middle school so that children start to re-enter our building on a per grade, 1 grade per week, March 8th, 15th, and 22nd. That's my motion for the middle school.
Okay, what's the board's pleasure?
I will second that motion. Jim
Okay.
Garofalo will second that motion.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair,
Okay.
I move that we limit discussion to 2 statements or questions per board member.
Okay. I'll go to Mr. Kubik, who hasn't spoken first.
Well, that's my motion. It's on the floor.
You're making a
second
second
that
motion.
motion.
We have a motion on the floor.
Right, I'm just limiting discussion is all. It needs a second and majority vote.
I second that motion. I don't know if you can make a second motion before the first one is resolved, but if we can, I second that motion.
I'll ask Mr. Stanek as a parliamentarian, a rule on that, please.
Mr. Stramello, Fred Stanek, the motion is in order.
Which motion?
The motion to limit debate.
Okay. All right. All those in favor of limiting the debate, please raise your hand so I could see. All right, 1.
I am. I can't raise my hand. But I am.
Okay, all right. So we are limiting debate. Okay. All right, Mrs. Bruno, anything more to add to the first motion by Ms. Harmling to bring back the middle school?
Mr. Stramello, Fred Stanek again.
Okay, I'm sorry.
What was the vote? Because the motion requires a 2/3 vote.
Thirds.
Okay, it requires a 2/3. All right, so let me, I'll need to record that. I'll start with Mrs. Bruno.
Kristen Bruno, yes.
Okay, Mr. Champagne,
Chris Champagne, yes.
Mr. Garofalo,
Oh, geez. No, what happened here? I got cut off.
No, you
No, we hear
didn't.
you.
We can hear you.
I lost the video. Yes, my vote is yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Ms. Harmeling,
I vote yes.
Mr. Hatfield. Can't hear you, Jay.
Jay Hatfield, yes.
Okay, Mr. Kubik,
Peter Kubik, yes.
Mrs. Nesteriak,
Beth Mysteriak, yes.
Mr. Stanek,
Brett Stanek, yes.
and Mr. Stramillo votes yes. Motion carries unanimously to 2 comments. Okay, Mrs. Bruno, would you like any comments or you're passing?
I support the motion to recommend to the superintendent that we move the middle school ahead in the timeline.
Okay, Mr. Champagne.
My only question is 1 week enough time, being that we have that 2-week rolling kind of tracking piece to the data? I don't know if that's a question for Ms. Bennett or our district doctor.
What do you think, Dr. Curtis or Mrs. Bennett?
I'm not,
I mean,
I'm not sure the question.
My question is 1 week enough time to get an understanding of the impact of adding additional students into the class?
I think that you bring up a very good point, actually, that, because, someone could be exposed and not show symptoms for a number of days later. It might make sense to wait longer, that you could have kids come back for a week and then another grade come back the next week, and you don't know where the pockets came from. So that is a good point.
Okay, so what do we think? And Mr. Wilson, is there a way to do it differently?
I think, just because of the nature of the middle school, it would be on a grade by grade basis. And to start on the 8th would put the 3 weeks, which would be 1 grade per. I don't think we could really, we could possibly look to separate the 7th grade class, but that's not really, it would be kind of tough because it would be 7th grade cohort A going with the 6th grade, and then 7th grade cohort B going with the 8th grade. So they would almost miss out. So I would think that it would be better to go 6, 7, and 8, while the others remain on the 3-2 hybrid, would be the appropriate thing. We would have to closely monitor, to Dr. Curtis's point, our COVID daily tracker. And we understand that that could change. And that's why we have 2 weeks in between each phased reentry. But understanding that, we wanted to give it a try at the middle school, so to speak, giving it a try with the 1 week, we would have to really closely monitor and look at that tracker and see where it is. Now, just as we've said all along, if changes have to be made, for example, if there is an outbreak or whatever, everyone just has to understand decisions are made based upon that real-time data. We hope that that does not happen. But I would say the only fair way to do it, Mr. Stramello, if we're going to invite them back and to continue with our slow approach, the only fair way to do it would be on a weekly basis. So I think it was Ms. Harmeling who made the motion, and pardon me if it wasn't. March 8th would be grade 6, March 15th would be grade 7, and March 22nd would be grade 8. So all of our middle school would be in by March 22nd. And then obviously moving forward, looking forward to our April 12th date for the high school. So I think it can be done cautiously. And I agree with you, Dr. Curtis. We've been very cautious all along. And I agree 2 weeks is obviously a better window for judgment. But because we have our up-to-date daily COVID tracker, we would have to really monitor that on a week-by-week basis. Obviously daily, but on a week-by-week basis.
Okay. I'm going to continue with the voting on the debating, and I think it's Jay's turn now.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I got a little confused with Mr. Wilson's statements there. So if we were to go with the approach of the motion that was made, it would just be sixth grade in for that time period, seventh and eighth would be entirely hybrid, or they would continue on the 3-2 split?
They would continue on the three, everyone else continues on the 3-2 split, Mr. Hatfield. So just like we did our K2 is back, our 3-5s are our 3-2 split. So by inviting grade 6 back that week, everyone else is on the 3-2 split. They're not missing any school. Following week, it would be 6 and 7. The only grades would be on 8-12 would be on the 3-2 split. And then after that, it would be our vacation week. And then after that, everyone would be back. So there would be no one left on the 3-2.
Okay.
Then if I could have a follow-up, Mr. Smeller,
Minimal debate. I mean,
Questions?
okay. It's Peter's turn, Jay.
So after listening to Mrs. Rowe and Ms. Freemuth, it sounds like the middle school is prepared for full in-school occupancy. So I would be voting in favor of going earlier and leaving it up to the administration as to, as to how to implement.
Okay, Mrs. Nisteriak.
Beth Mysteriak, I agree with Peter. I think that it sounds.
Did you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we did, Peter. Yes.
Sounds like from the Seymour Middle School administration, they're prepared
Here.
and that they're able to accommodate an earlier start date back full. But I agree, there's some logistics, it sounds, that needs to be worked out around the state of those grades coming back.
Okay. Mr. Stanek.
Yes, Mr. Stramello, if I may. So if I may have Mr. Wilson. Mr. Wilson,
Yes, Mr. Standing?
so you are agreeable to complying with the motion if this motion passes? Is that what you're telling us?
I am, provided, as I said, it is that week by week slow approach, Mr. Stanek. While we can continually monitor the data to make sure that our number of cases at our middle school are still manageable and not would be the cause for concern. Our high school, I cannot support an early return earlier than April 12th just because of the numbers and the spacing at the high school, as Mr. Freund and Mr. Lucky shared this evening. But since we're talking exclusively about the middle school, and to answer your question, Mr. Stanek, yes, I could support grade 6 starting on March 8th, grade 7 starting on March 15th, and grade 8 starting on March 22nd.
The reason I ask is that we heard Attorney Dugos's opinion letter, and I'm wondering, if you're in agreement with what the motion is.
I am, and thank you for asking for the clarification. I really appreciate that, Mr. Stanek.
Thank you.
Okay, and my chance for the minimal debate is I agree with the change to bring the middle school back in the staggered motion that has been presented. Okay, since Mr. Champagne made the motion to limit debate, we need to vote on that motion.
Mr. Stramello, please, if I
Yes.
might. Thank you. I haven't made a comment since making the motion, and Mr. Champagne said 2 comments or questions each. So.
I missed you. I'm sorry.
Yep. I just want to, unless I missed something, Mr. Wilson, in the current plan that was shared with the community, the middle school and the high school were not going to have a staggered return, right? They were going to have a full return?
That's correct, because by
Right.
April, by April 12th, correct.
So I just wanted to put that out there, because so we're going to do a staggered. So the idea of 2 weeks serving some kind of role better than a 1 week, well, we were never going to do a staggered return on the middle school or the high school. So I just wanted to put that out there for the community and for the board, because if we think about it, the towns surrounding us who have gone back full time, they are the evidence that when you go back full time, you don't see a big spike in cases, right? We don't need to prove that out within each of our own schools within Seymour. We know that if the mitigating factors are in place and people go back to school full time, we're not going to see a spike. So yeah, we'll watch our numbers daily like we always do. But I just wanted to put out there that I'm very happy with a 1 week staggered, and I don't feel a reason to do a 2 week. in any way, shape, or form based on the ability to watch numbers. That's all I wanted to share.
Okay. Mr. Wilson, did you want to respond or no?
No, I think I just was listening to the rest of Ms. Harmeling's clarification.
Mhm.
I think she's in agreement with the 1 week, provided
Yes.
we closely monitor it. I don't want to speak for you, Ms. Harmeling. That's what I got out of that at the end. Is
No,
that correct?
I'm actually not, I mean, we always monitor and that's great and that's always important, but that shouldn't be bundled with a conversation about the middle school and the high school because it was never the plan to stagger a 2-week opening anyway.
No, but just for further clarification, you're 100% correct. We were going to bring them back. And that was also with the hopes. And as I said, we're not pinning everything on the vaccine, but there's a lot of evidence that everyone will be vaccinated by that April 12th date, which we're very hopeful for. I'm not making promises that I cannot keep. More to come on that, but that was also playing into our decision as well. But yes, you're correct. Everyone was going to come back on the 12th.
Yeah.
So doing a staggered approach at the middle school will allow more data.
Okay, now in order to follow Mr. Champagne's amendment, we have to stop discussing now and we have to do a vote on the new plan for the middle school. So again, I will start with Mrs. Bruno. Everyone understands the motion to bring the middle school back 8 and I keep forgetting, Mr. Wilson, 8, 15,
22.
22.
You got it, Mr. Stramello.
Okay, that motion was made by Ms. Harmling and was seconded by Mr. Garfalo. Mrs. Bruno,
Yes.
Mr. Champagne,
Yes.
Mr. Garofalo,
Yes.
Ms. Harmling,
Yes.
Mr. Hatfield,
Yes.
Mr. Kubik,
Peter Cubic, yes.
Ms. Nesteriak,
Beth Mysteriak, yes.
Mr. Stanek,
Fred Stanek, yes.
and Mr. Stramello votes yes. Okay. I believe that ends this portion of the agenda. So, Mr. Hatfield, you had a motion that you shared.
Wait a
I'm
second.
sorry.
What?
You go, Kristen, please.
Okay. I think there's more to discuss about the high school.
Okay, all right.
First of all, I would just like to make the comment, Mr. Wilson has talked about, the vaccine, and I just don't understand how an April 12th date resting on the vaccine. Yes, teachers will be vaccinated by April 12th. Students, first of all, the vaccine is only approved for kids ages 16 and up, and they're not in the state's plan until May. So if we're really resting it on the vaccine, we may not see, and student safety, we may not see students back this year. So I think we need to be upfront about that, if that's what you're thinking. I think if we are going with the plan and looking at the April 12th date, and again, looking at the numbers, knowing that right now we're at 20.3, the decline, if the numbers continue to decline, I think that the superintendent should review that April 12th date sooner if the numbers, just like if they go up, we would look at pulling back. 2 other things, if we're not going to change the plan for high school or discuss changing the plan for high school tonight, I would want to talk about, really based on the public comment, the decision around the honor roll and reinstating and revisiting the honor roll in order to recognize kids that have persevered and done well. And then the other conversation is our decision around participation in sports and clubs for kids who are the temporary remote by choice, just in order to increase the engagement and opportunity.
Mrs. Bruno, I think the first one would be adding to the agenda because that was the grades are not really part of the reopening. Okay. The sports is a different issue, but I also think that may not be on this special meeting.
So certainly
we are meeting on Monday, which is 4 days away or whatever.
That's
So,
fine.
I mean, we could discuss it at that time, obviously, because we can add to the agenda. Unless, you know, I'll have to relook at the agenda whether that was included. But that may come up in the curriculum committee report that is on the agenda. Those two items. Okay, Mrs. Bruno. Yes, Ms. Harmling.
So I'd like to build on Mrs. Bruno's first point. I have expressed it before this meeting. I don't understand why the date of April 12th was selected. That is still about 6 weeks away. Take out spring break. That's 5 weeks of hybrid, when we could, in my mind, reduce it by 2 weeks, reduce it by 3 weeks. What do we expect to be different with this pandemic on April 12th? That's going to be dramatically different from March 12th or March 8th or March 15th. If the numbers signal, the community spread numbers signal, we can go back. And we've been fully transparent, and I'm sure the school district wouldn't mind sharing all those excellent pictures that the high school teachers and administration took of the high school. As long as we are giving parents a full understanding of what their child's in-school experience would like, it should be a parent's choice to decide what level of risk is acceptable to them. So I would like to understand the April 12th date and what exactly we expect to be different April 12th versus March 12th. And I hear what you're saying about vaccinations, Mr. Wilson, but to Mrs. Bruno's point, vaccinations only impact the teacher. And if there's any of our schools where the teachers should be able to maintain 6 feet of distance from their students, it's the high school. That's awfully hard to do at an elementary school, little less hard to do at a middle school, but at a high school, so they're two separate populations. Yes, they're in the same classroom, but a teacher can keep their 6 feet difference. So I can't rest walking away from this meeting and just saying, okay, fine, we'll just wait till the 12th of the high school. It's just not fair. It's not fair. And our kids are being harmed too much. Mr. Garfalo raised the point about the curriculum committee meeting where we saw the number of failures. They are horrific. And it's not because our teachers aren't trying their darndest to get our students to learn. It's because our kids aren't engaged, and our kids aren't engaged because our kids aren't in school. So I don't know what we're supposed to do as a board, but I don't feel like we can walk away from this meeting leaving the high school with an April 11th, April 12th date.
The only thing I could share, I don't know how to answer what could be different or not. You heard from Mr. Freund, and by all means, he could feel free to articulate anything else he'd like, but you'd also heard from our district doctor who is saying at the older levels, there's more concern. You know, Mr. Freund brought up a concept of risk factors. You know, the vaccine is just one elimination of a risk factor. And yes, it's just for the staff at this point, but it ensures that our staff will remain in the building. We all talk about staff and student safety. We understand that the students can't be vaccinated until a later date. But those factors and the spread amongst our older students, which we've even seen and you see on our tracker, is elevated at our older levels. The spacing, the amount of times that our students are transitioning.
I hear you.
The fact of April 12th also helps because hopefully the weather, as we also shared, you know, the tent will be back up. Mr. Freund could use that outside seating area. So we can control some of the narrative and bring back the students safely. So it's not a matter of just bring them back because we want to expedite the date. We want to ensure the safety of the students and the staff. And while I understand the vaccine, from what everyone is saying, only ensures the staff component, that's not what we're talking about, just ensuring the staff. That's an important factor, but we're also ensuring student safety by, if we could open up those more outdoor areas so that Mr. Freund and Mr. Lucky and Mr. DeStacy don't have that overcrowded cafeteria, because as we know, there's going to be those transition times. So the fact of April 12th, as opposed to March 15th or whatever date arbitrarily to come back even sooner, it's to help prevent and to keep our students and staff safe, because Mr. Freund articulated the concerns at the high school and the numbers of small numbers that would have to be crammed into those classrooms and the lack of social distancing in those areas. So we're making our decision based on those facts, by the facts of.
If I could.
By all means, I'm just answering your question.
No, but the only answer to the question was that hopefully by April 12th, the tents will be outside. That's the only thing that is going to change. The classrooms aren't going to get any bigger between now and April 12th, right? So the only thing that makes an argument for April 12th versus an earlier date is the tent would be up and we might be able to be outside. But we all know Connecticut weather. It could very well be warmer in the month of March than it might be in the month of April. So what I'm trying to do, Mr. Wilson, is narrow down and understand why April 12th and why we wouldn't be seeking to make an opening happen earlier if we can. If the weather's nice, why wouldn't we go back? It's not enough to say that on April 12th, we hope the weather will be nice and we'll put the tents up, and that's why we picked April 12th. Because again, what else is going to change between now and April 12th? We've already got our other kids back in school, and it needs to be a parent's choice in terms of what risk factors are acceptable. I don't know why there's resistance to Mrs. Bruno's idea. Would it be more complicated? Yes, it would be, but this is the world we live in. It's a complicated world. So we've already brought back what I like to call hybrid plus, right? There are 2 hybrid cohorts. Kids that were struggling were invited to come back. Why can't we do a survey and say, who else would like to come back with full knowledge that your child and you as a teenager might be in a classroom that does not have 3 feet or maybe even 2 feet between desks? This is all I'm trying to say. We need to empower parents to determine acceptable risk. I made the point before, for the little ones, they have more time without their masks. For the older ones, they have less social distancing. But it really troubles me that we're just going to sit back and wait until April 12th happens, when the only thing I've heard that would be different is we'll have a tent outside.
Okay,
And
thank
some
you, Ms.
teachers will be
Harmling.
vaccinated.
Thank you, Ms. Harmling. Mr. Freund.
Yeah, if I may, like I say, when I started my presentation, I said that we all believe it would be in the best interest of the students to get them in as soon as possible. Part of my presentation also addressed or questioned after the fact that the high schools that are in full have large percentages that are chosen distance learning. Part of what Mrs. Harmling said, which is interesting to me, is that if the community fully knew that we were bringing everyone back, how would that impact the percentage of our students who were choosing to be full distance? Now, if that percentage goes up significantly higher, 40%, 45%, we may be able to provide the safe environment that the students would need and the faculty would need, because that's an unknown. We don't know how that would impact the number of people choosing full distance. And it's hard to address this without knowing that unknown factor.
Okay, if I can make a suggestion with, after hearing Mr. Freund, can we put out a questionnaire or a survey to find out what the parent community would do if we were to bring them back earlier, Mr. Wilson?
We can. I mean, Dr. Curtis, I'd love to, I know you've supported that date for the older students. Is there any rationale that you could think of that might not have been articulated for, a delay in bringing back our high school population that we might have not discussed before I answer the question?
Well, the only thing I would say is, and April 12th may be further than we need to, but it's just to prove that the drop that we're seeing in cases in the community really is a trend that's going to be, and that it's not just going to turn right around once we start opening things back up. If hopefully it is a trend, hopefully maybe the vaccine has something to do with it, the continued social distancing and stuff, et cetera. But that would be the one thing. It would give us longer time to show that, yes, it really did come down and we actually made it down maybe to where we were in the fall, rather than just down to the peak we saw in the summer.
Thank you. So I think to answer your question, Mr. Stramello, I think we still have to continually monitor. I think that, if to Dr. Curtis's point, we see a continual decline, and that's a decline with all 3 health metrics. Remember, not just our community spread, but our metrics as well, which our COVID tracker indicates that most of our cases were at that secondary level. It's pretty interesting in terms of we have to, that close monitoring, it's what's going to make that determining factor. Now, to your point, Mr. Stramello, by all means, in the interim, let's just say we throw out an arbitrary date of March 22nd. I'm just making that up. Mr. Freund can definitely poll his community and see who would stay out on full distance and have that as well in our back pocket. But we have to be cautious and aware of our return based on all of the factors that were shared this evening. So if a survey is the board's pleasure, Mr. Freund and Mr. Lucky and Mr. DeStasi can definitely send out a survey. But I think we have to be aware of looking at our data, looking at our trends, looking at our tracker, looking at our health numbers by town, and making that determination when it is safe for students and staff to return. Right now, the numbers, as Nurse Bennett referenced, we stood the same. So we're still elevated. We have not decreased. The hope is that we do decrease, but our numbers at the high school, according to our tracker, are still higher than others. They are coming down. We've seen a little less impact, if you will, in terms of notifications that have been sent out of confirmed cases. But I think that's stuff we just need to continually monitor. And that's why in the plan, that's why we had it outlined as such.
Okay, other board members wishing to comment on the high school situation? Now's your chance, please. Yes, Mr. Champagne.
I'm just curious, because we're always hearing about other towns. Mr. Wilson, if I may, what are our surrounding towns like Ansonia, Region 16? Are they all full 5 days in?
No, I appreciate the question, Mr. Champagne. And that data was actually shared with all the board members, I believe through the chair and the vice chair. Most of the towns are still on hybrid, and their hybrid is not even a unique hybrid as we are in a 3-2. We're very unique in that 3-2 to give our students more in-day learning opportunities. Some of the other towns you referenced, Ansonia, they're in full in their high school, but they're in full for a half day. Derby is in full because I believe they have 48%, I believe, or 45%. I don't want to be misspeaking about the number of students out on temporary full distance learning, and they're a smaller school as well. So those factors allow for other districts to do that. But when you looked at that chart that was shared, and our high school administration and all the administrators on the call have that chart, we are not alone in our approach in a current hybrid. Actually, to your point, Mr. Champagne, we're the first to put down a date of April 12th, to my knowledge. Other schools on that chart have yet to set a date for a return. They're still opting to stay in hybrid, and that is their choice. But we're opting to put a date there and to monitor our data so that we can get our students back. And the fact that we have a 3-2, which offers more in-person learning opportunities than any other of the districts that are in hybrid, I think is a testament to all the hard work of the members on this team. So thank you for the question, Mr. Champagne.
Okay, any other board members? Mr. Stanek?
If I may, as I listen to the discussion this evening, I have to defer to our board counsel, and in his opinion, and I'm hearing the superintendent, the office of the superintendent is listening to us and agreed with the motion with regard to the middle school, but does not seem to agree with some discussion about returning to high school earlier than April 12th. Also, I have to listen to Dr. Curtis, and for those reasons, I'm going to have to say that if a motion is made, we would have to vote in favor of only in favor of what the administration is asking.
Ms. Nesteriak?
I think there's a lot more information that probably from my opinion, the board, I'd like to hear about. I mean, I think I was a little confused when the third option of a hybrid was tossed out as a potential solution as well, that would increase numbers. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think that, so for me, it's a difficult decision, not understanding some of the answers, some of the discussion we talked about, I don't think we really came to conclusion about in terms of alternatives.
Okay. Mr. Garfalo?
I have nothing else to add.
Okay, Mr. Kubik?
I have nothing to add right now.
Okay, and Mrs. Bruno, you have, just for Peter's thing, and then I'll come to you, Ms. Homling. I have that chart in front of me, Chris. Avon's hybrid, Vegan Falls is hybrid, Berlin is hybrid, Ranford is hybrid, Coventry is full in person, Derby High School full in person, 35% DL, East Hampton 612 hybrid, Guilford hybrid, Hampden High School hybrid, Hartford hybrid, Middletown hybrid, 30% DL, Monroe hybrid, Newtown full in person, but 700 full distance learning students at the high school. Nanawag is full in person, students only attending a part of Northern High School's hybrid, New Fairfield full in person, New Milford hybrid, Oxford hybrid, groups 1 Monday, Tuesday, Plainfield full in person, Poprog hybrid, Portland full in person, Region 13 full in person, 17% DL, Ridgefield hybrid, Rocky Hill full in person, 60% students DL. Shelton High School hybrid with 2 groups, Southington hybrid, Torrington hybrid, Trumbull hybrid, Wallingford hybrid, Waterbury High School hybrid, Weathersfield hybrid, Wyndham hybrid, and Wilcott hybrid. That was the chart that Mrs. Boyle put together for us. Okay, Ms. Harmling.
So I just want to mention 2 things building on what Mr. Stanek said. I did feel like Dr. Curtis, felt like it didn't necessarily have to be April 12th. He was really sending a message of caution there. And the other thing is, so with the hybrid option, really it would just be, to Mrs. Zatiriak's point, children who no longer wanted to do hybrid and would prefer to be in person full time, but were not invited to be in person full time, they would just simply have the option to go full time, while other students who wanted to stay hybrid could stay hybrid. So that would be 3rd option. And it would definitely have the impact of having fewer kids in our building than if they actually were all full time. So I also wanted to put in, I do believe that Fairfield schools, all schools are going back full time, including the high school fairly soon. So for me, I don't think there's a motion to be made except to perhaps direct administration to do a survey, but I just need to share that I'm just incredibly disappointed, because I understand, Mr. Wilson, that you're saying, oh, it's a good thing that we put a target date on the calendar, but I think we all need to remember that the original target date we put on the calendar that parents and students got excited about was, I believe, February 12th. And so we moved that back 2 months, and I am still not to hear a really solid argument about the reason why we are not allowing high school parents to have a choice. And that's all I'm going to say. I have not heard a compelling argument of why we're not giving choice to let families say what's acceptable risk and why we're treating the high school so dramatically different. We've got to find a way to use the high school space more creatively. There are places students can learn. If a student says, up 24 kids in this class, I don't want to be in this classroom, they can go to the library media center and log in. We just have to give families the opportunity to get their students back in school. And we moved it back almost 2 months.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Jay Hatfield.
Yes.
Couple things. One, I did hear something about Fairfield too, and I'm not sure if Mrs. Bruno, I don't want to put her on the spot, but if she could share, maybe not now, but maybe at the next meeting, some more detail, was that part of the idea that so many people went on distance learning that freed up some of the space? I did work in Fairfield early on in my career, and I know they do have a lot bigger, some of their areas are bigger than ours, but I'm curious to see the rationale or more information behind that. The second thing is, again, I think we are making steps towards Mrs. Harmon's point of giving people choice by collecting some more of that data. Again, when I heard Mr. Freund talk about some of the issues there, it is concerning. And again, I see it every day. We have teachers that don't go into the cafeteria because they're concerned. Kids are there without their masks on and they're talking, etc. You cannot, we only have one cafeteria. You can't put any more kids in there. The other option would be to use the gym And then you don't have any sports because we don't have the manpower to continue to change over classrooms into the gym, etc. I'm speaking for my building. So I think we're getting toward giving choice, and hopefully that will help make us some progress by collecting that data.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, now the next item, Mr. Hatfield, you were going to address as you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to postpone, or excuse me, to table. I think it's 3B, superintendent vacancy update and business manager vacancy update to the Monday meeting, March 1st, 2021. For the simple reason that they're still active postings at this current time for our search firm and the business manager, and we hope that we'll have more of an update on Monday.
I second that motion.
Okay, who was that that seconded, please?
I seconded, Kristen.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. Yep. Okay. Any discussion needed on that? Okay, hearing none. Mrs. Bruno to table.
Yes.
Mr. Champagne.
Chris Champagne, yes.
Mr. Garofalo.
Jim Garofalo, yes.
Ms. Harmling.
Yes.
Mr. Hatfield.
Jay Hatfield, yes.
Mr. Kubik.
Peter Kubik, yes.
Mrs. Nesteriak.
Beth Nasiriak, yes.
Mr. Stanek.
Brett Stanek, yes.
And Mr. Stromello votes yes, unanimous to table. A motion to adjourn is in order.
So moved. This is Kristen Harmeling.
Second.
Second. Chris Champagne. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, our meeting is officially adjourned. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Right.